Hey guys, welcome back to We Are Wolverines, the special edition of We Are Wolverines. I'll be your host today, Sheran, and I'm joined by Sage Lloyd. Just a tiny reminder to everyone is that we here at the UVU Review do not endorse any of the candidates, but we did want to give every single candidate an opportunity to reach out to you guys and let you guys know why you guys should vote for them and where they come from and what is their background. And so, Sage, thank you so much for joining me here today. I appreciate your time. Yeah, of course. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen interviews, especially my interviews. They go slightly different from everybody else's. I like asking hard questions, but before I ask hard questions, I also like knowing people. We did Google searching on you. I had a whole team just doing a Google search. But before we get into that one, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so short answer, my name is Sage. I'm 20 years old. I recently moved to Utah, so I'm a bit new here. I'm a transfer student to UVU. I started out an associate's at Northwest Vista in San Antonio, Texas, and then I started my bachelor's at Our Lady of Lake University, and then I ended up here at UVU by fate.
Cool. Why UVU?
Honestly, it was not my first choice, but I am so glad I ended up here. Basically, what happened is at my last university, I was a collegiate athlete and I got injured. My doctors told me my athletic career was over, and I had the hardest time with that because that was my whole life. So I decided it was time for a change of scenery and I needed to get out of the state. I have a sister living up here, so I knew Utah was a place for me because I'm real big on family ties. And my dad actually had gone to UVU when he was in college, so I kind of looked into it and it was the right spot for me.
Nice. So you brought up that you were injured, and that is one of the things that we found out was that you got injured. You were a cheerleader.
Yes.
So what happened?
Short answer, a lot of concussions. Cheer is notorious for being a sport that can induce brain damage, similar to things like football. So I got dropped a couple of times, and it kind of rattled me. I was in a place where the concussions weren't really stopping. They kept coming, so my doctors knew it wasn't in their better interest to leave me up in the air, flipping around and standing on top of people. Said it was just better to pull me.
Nice. Wow. Sorry to hear that. It definitely sucks when your bell gets rung.
It's a little hard, but I think that God has a plan in everything, and I'm glad I'm here now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so you did go to a couple of universities prior, and this is your second semester here?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just dive into it, if you don't mind. Second semester, why do you think you should be in student government, and why should people choose you?
So a large part of my qualifications goes back to what I've done at other universities. I'm a Dean's List student. I've had a 4.0 every semester I've been in college. I've been involved in student leadership at my other universities. But one of the large reasons I think I'd be a good fit for UVU is because I'm coming in not as somebody who's previously served with UVUSA, but as somebody who is a student like our entire student body. I saw things that I thought could be adjusted or that could be made easier for students. And as a student myself, I wanted to be a voice for my peers. So I wasn't coming into it with any idea really of how UVUSA worked until I started the elections process. I just wanted to be a voice for the student body because I saw those needs as a student.
Cool. Something that you had mentioned, I think this is on your little 3-page essay on I make fun of everybody on that thing, so it's not a personal attack. But you wrote something along the lines that advising was inconsistent. Why do you think, do you have anything, data to back up that claim, number one? Number two, let's say you did, okay? If you were elected, how do you plan to measure improvement in a quantifiable way?
Yeah, so a lot of it came from peer experience. I did look into some of the statistics on that, but a lot of it's just gauging what student opinion has been. So I'm happy to go. I just don't have it off the top of my head. But part of that, just talking to people and seeing it myself, is sometimes what advisors were telling students versus what they were seeing on Wolverine Track was just not matching up. I had a specific issue with requirements that were showing on Wolverine Track that I was confused about and I was having a really hard time figuring out. But then I went in to talk to my advisor and they were saying, actually, just ignore that requirement. But then I talked to a different advisor and they said, no, that's important. And so inconsistencies like that, I was having a hard time with. And when I reached out to some of my peers, I found that they were having similar issues, which I think is really important. Also, just being from other universities, I've seen how their processes track compared to ours, what works for them and doesn't, and what works here and doesn't. So I think that helps me to kind of have more insight into what could be clear, whereas other people might not find issues with things. Moving forward, there's specific requirements. Like there's a certain writing enrichment requirement that I had noticed specifically that I had somebody working in the transfer department who told me, yeah, don't worry about that. So for me, it was, well, if it's don't worry about it, then why is it listed as required on my Wolverine track? So things like that, I feel like could specifically be addressed where there's specific instances. As for how much power I have to actually make change, that's not something I'm entirely sure on, but it's something I would like to bring up, and I would like to bring more specific examples if elected to say, hey, specific things like this are confusing. The verbiage can be confusing to students, and see what we can do to implement changes to make the entire process more concise.
Yeah, for sure. So let's work on the assumption that you do get elected. What are some things, some ideas that you have to try to, again, we don't know the scope of your ability, right, within the office. And so what are some of the ideas that you think that you should and could be able to apply?
So that writing enrichment requirement was one thing that just off the top of my head, I think that needs to be more clear, just because I know myself and other students were confused on that. So that's something I can instantly say, like, I want to determine, is this something that's required or is it not? I'd love to look through degree plans and see, because there are things that change. And I've heard this from other departments as well, that there are things that people are told they need, but then they end up not using, or classes that can be swapped in. So I'd love to go in and actually look at degree plans and say, hey, what is necessary? As a student myself, I would hate to take a class or spend money on a class just to find out I don't need it, or rearrange my schedule just to find out that, hey, that's something that's actually not required. So if elected, I know one thing specifically I would like to look at is degree requirements and how to make things easier and more concise for students.
Awesome. That was great. Okay, so you also emphasized clarity and accountability in academic advising. What concrete enforcement mechanisms would you implement if advising offices fail to meet the standards you're advocating for?
I think a lot of that kind of goes back to making those degree plans more clear. I think some of the issue with that lack of clarity comes from, even talking to my advisors, some of them have said there's some confusion within the programs. So I think first and foremost, we need to figure out those degree programs, figure out what's needed, what's available, what can be substituted. Just because I think sometimes we unfairly place that blame on our advisors just because that's who we talk to when we're trying to set things up. So if things fall through the cracks, I know I've been guilty of being frustrated with my advisors as well as other students, because that's who we go to, when sometimes that's not even necessarily their fault, which I learned when talking to advisors about certain requirements and things. Sometimes it's coming from their higher ups, sometimes they're just as confused, and some of them do a great job of communicating that, others not so much. So I think it would be good to just kind of get on the same page, understand what we need to do moving forward, because if we're all on the same page with what's required, it's a lot easier to communicate that to students.
Okay. UVU is a very unique place. You have people from all walks of life. A lot of people don't, or at least the motto is C's gets degrees, right? Which is the truth. You might be a 4.0 student. Someone else might be a 2.5, and they might beat you in job placement. You're trying to get this high-end job, and that 4.0 doesn't matter anymore. And you've attended 3 different institutions, is that correct? Including this one, or is this the 4th?
Including UVU.
Including this one. And you've maintained a 4.0 in each. You value that, obviously, but how will you ensure that your perspective of high-achieving students doesn't unintentionally overlook the realities of other students, including international students and non-traditional students?
Absolutely. So for me, ideally, I want everyone to get out of here with a degree, whether that's a Dean's List achieving degree or just a C's that get degrees. I think everyone who puts in the time and puts in the effort deserves a degree. For me, I just really loved learning straight out of pretty much high school. I loved learning, loved school. And I had kind of a hard time when I first got to college. I was not doing quite so well my first semester. I think it was the first time I'd ever had to really lock in and study for a class. And that kind of tore me down. I was really struggling with that. So it definitely took me a while to work to that 4.0, but I have no shame against people who don't have 4.0s. I understand that not everyone achieves the same grades as me, and I don't think that's anything that puts me above anyone. My priority is in the education that you're receiving. I hope that people are here with a genuine desire to learn. For me, it's more about wanting to learn than the grade itself. It's just a byproduct of me putting in extra hours and spending more time on assignments sometimes. But I think the priority here is valuing your education and making sure you're learning everything you need to. A grade on a paper doesn't define you. If you really have been able to conceptualize the material and you're able to put it into play, I think that's far more important.
Okay, so how is your plan and your advocacy for of you reminding people that you're a 4.0 student? Like how do you think that comes across to people who don't have the ability or the time to be able to dedicate 2-3 hours. What is it? What's the statistic that they tell us every single time in our rubric? Like 1-3 credit classes, 4 hours.
Yeah. Studying.
Yeah. What if those people aren't able to because they have a 40-50 hour job? So like your statement, right, kind of already alienates other people. So like how do you try to tell them like, hey, nah, like I get it, right? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a good point to bring up. My intention is never to be isolating or alienating to any population, but I get how that can come up as something that's alienating. Ideally, my goal was to show the qualifications of how I've had such a large interest in academics and why it's been so important to me, which is why I'm going to advocate for your needs. But I understand that can be alienating to people. Ideally, I think going back to, goals and what I want to see for people is that I want to be a voice for the entire student body, whether that's low achieving or high achieving students. But with that, I also understand what it's like to be a full-time busy student. I work a couple of different jobs. I'm in school full-time. I'm used to having extracurriculars and managing a bunch of different things. So I really would love to reach the student body, aside from elections, on a personal level and be able to say, hey, how can I help you? This is something I did at my last university with my collegiate team. I actually went in with them and I said, hey, I'm going to have a meeting with everyone and we're going to do time planning and organizing. And I helped people literally go through all of their class rosters, all of their syllabuses, set up calendars, set up deadlines to say, hey, I have a skill with organizing where other people might not so much, and I'd love to help you. So on a personal level, I really do want to help people. If you're not a high achieving student, that's okay. I want to make sure you get your degree, no matter what grade it comes with.
Cool. Sorry to focus so much on like the differences between what you are and what some other people might, but how do you plan to make sure that I don't know, non-white, non-traditional students, so older than 25, with kids, with a family, are able to reach out to you, let's say, whether you win the election or not? How can they reach out to you and be like, hey, I need help. You just said you're great at organizing. I'm busy. I'm a busy mom. I'm a busy dad. I have a 50-hour job. Like, they have a profession, but they're trying to get their bachelor's degree for X and Y reasons. How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think reaching out is sometimes hard. I know I've been told by people I can come across as intimidating, which hurts me to hear because I try to be open to everyone, but I know it's hard to sometimes reach out to people that you might not know as well, might not feel comfortable approaching, which is why I really try to engage with my student body. I try to, smile at people in the hallway, give compliments where I can, welcome conversations, just because I think building that bridge with people makes it a lot easier to approach you. I love this question specifically because a lot of my closest friends at UVU are non-traditional older students. I have a friend in one of my first classes that I talk to every day who's probably about 10 to 20 years older than me, but we find things to connect on, and he'll ask me for help with some things, I'll ask him for help. Some of my other close friends that have actually helped with my campaign have families, have kids, and this is something I've talked to about them. How can I make you feel welcome? I think a lot of times we see the students that are in our classes and go to school with us, but being a transfer student, I understand that not every student here is your typical cookie cutter student. We have a lot of first gen students, a lot of international students, a lot of non-traditional freshmen. We really get a wide group of everything here at UVU, which I love. I think it's fantastic. So I think just opening up conversation and finding ways to connect with people shows them that I'm here to be there for them.
What I think the question itself was an answer. How can they reach out to you? Like, what is your preferred method?
Right.
What's the best way for somebody else to reach out to you?
Gotcha. Sorry, I missed that.
No, you're good.
Honestly, any way someone reaches out, I'm usually pretty good at responding. I'm very vocal on platforms like Instagram, social media. I think that's pretty popular around people my age. For my friends that are older in my classes or that have families, I know a lot of them have reached out to me via Teams before. I've even had people go through class rosters, message me on Canvas, but I've never had someone reach out to me on any of those platforms where I haven't responded or they felt that I haven't engaged. So for me and people of my generation and age, social media I think is the easiest. That's where I get a lot of UVU students that reach out to me and ask for help or ask about myself. But for those non-typical students or people who aren't on social media, I know the platforms that UVU has itself are really great. I love that we have things in place like Teams or like Canvas where you can just directly message your peers and it's easy to get in contact.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Question. You go by Sage. Why?
I do, yeah. So my mom gave me the middle name when I was born, obviously. I grew up going by the name Brindley. It is my first name, but I have always loved the name Sage. It's really just been my favorite. And it's also one of my grandpa's favorites. He's one of the people near and dear to me in my life. And so he loved it growing up. And then at my last team, my entire team called me Sage. My coach called me that one day and then just kind of stuck on. So I got so used to hearing that when I moved over to Utah, I saw it as an opportunity to kind of reinvent myself. And it just was a name that reminded me of the people that I loved and that cared about me. So it just kind of stuck and I've kept with it.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. If budget constraints limit expanded hybrid offerings or additional course sections, what trade-offs would you prioritize and why?
Like, what am I giving up in the budget to allow for expansion? I mean, I really would like to look into some of our department resources and see what's being utilized by students. I think a lot of that could come from student polling because I'm not in every department. I can speak for, my department, but I'm not in every department seeing what's getting used. We have a lot of different resources. UVU provides a lot of great ones. I would love to actually look into what resources students are utilizing and what they feel actually benefits them, just because I think there's always room for readjustment there. And I think a lot of that would come from just student polling. Obviously, the polls I could put out as a student myself would only go to my peers and the people that I speak with. So I think that would be better done on a university scale than by myself, but it's definitely something to look into.
Okay, great. So we do digging, obviously, and we try to be a proper newspaper and a proper news organization. With that being said, when we knew that we were going to interview different people, we did dig and try to figure some stuff out. When it comes to you, we know that you are affiliated, associated, team member, whatever you want to call it, with Turning Point. That is obviously something that's very polarizing in this climate that we're in. How do you see your membership with Turning Point, who claims to not be a political affiliated club, with student government?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad this got brought up because this is something that's come up frequently throughout my campaign. Yeah. Turning Point is nonpartisan, but I know regardless of their terminology, a lot of people do view us as partisan. I think the important thing here is being able to separate my personal opinions from the voice of the student body. Largely, my goal is to be a voice for our student body, for our Wolverines. And I get how that can seem a little bit off-putting to some people because some people don't think that I'd be able to put aside my personal beliefs. One example I brought up at the elections debate that I think is really crucial here is there's been a hot topic right now about putting in place a memorial for Charlie Kirk. Obviously, personal opinions, I have mine. But when it came down to it, one of the things I brought up to my officer board and to my fellow peers was, hey, as much as we may want something of his likeness and his magnitude here on campus, there's an entire student population here that also pays tuition, has a right to be here, that might not want to see that because they feel, to quote them, victimized by his words. Regardless of my personal opinions, that was something I brought up to my students, and I actually brought up to people that were working with the memorial committee themselves, which I think is kind of a show that there's a time to have personal opinions, and then there's a time to put the needs of your students first. I get that to some people, I know they think I won't be able to. I already know that there's student groups, or I shouldn't say student groups, but members within student groups who are advocating for not voting for me specifically because of my organization. And I understand that. I get where they're coming from, and I get that can be something that kind of scares people off. But I think the priority here is for me to put your needs above mine. And I also think there's a system of checks and balances within any position that you run for. So I know some people are saying that if I get elected, I'm just going to run in and make UVU conservative. And quite honestly, I don't think I have that power, but also that's not my intent. My intent is to represent the student body, whether they agree with me or not. I'm here for the people.
Great. Thank you. And we're going to sit here for a little bit, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some may view Turning Point rhetoric as divisive. How can you assure that, quote unquote, marginalized or politically different students, that your academic advocacy would remain neutral and inclusive to them?
Yeah, so great example of this. I had some friends that were collecting just kind of examples of where they had felt that they had been shown bias because of their conservative beliefs in class and had brought up papers they thought were graded unfairly or things that they thought weren't correct. And there were some where I thought I could maybe see this through a lens of bias, but I had a friend that I told straight up, I said, no, you're reading into things. And she got a little frustrated and said, well, you're supposed to be on my side because we're being targeted as conservatives. And I said, no, you're reading into this. Your paper wasn't written well. It was graded fairly. Yes, it revolved around conservative opinions, but that's not why you got the grade you did. If you take it to somebody else to grade, I'm pretty sure they would give you the same grade. So part of that's just kind of keeping people with my same beliefs in line, but also in terms of advocating for the groups who feel like they aren't welcomed by me. I try to be welcoming to everyone. I've tried bridging the gap recently. I've tried to engage more with the members of those who have differing beliefs than me. I know I've been talking a lot to some of the officers of the CDC lately. I think they're lovely people. And I think that politics have an important place within our growing generation, but I also think that everyone is a human being at the end of the day. And we all have things that connect us regardless of our politics. So I've really been trying to get out and talk to students and connect with people who I know might not think the same way as I do, because I think connection is so vital to everything we do. And we are all human. Everyone wants a place to belong and everyone wants to feel loved.
Yeah. And if you were to be elected, would you separate yourself from any public affiliation with Turning Point USA?
If that was something required of me by UVU itself, because I know that's come into play at some other institutions,
Sure.
Then it's definitely something I would look into. I wouldn't like to renounce my affiliation with my group, just because it's something I've dedicated a lot of time to, and that resonates very deeply with me. But I would make a concerted effort to be sure that everyone knew I was moving forward without bias, making sure I have my peers within UVUSA keep me in check, and having a system of checks and balances so that people can be assured that I'm acting on behalf of the student body and not my own personal bias.
Okay, but so if there isn't anything within the student government bylaws, you wouldn't willingly, just for the sake of face, you wouldn't separate yourself from Turning Point for the 2 semesters or the time that you serve in student government?
I wouldn't, no. Honestly, I intend to work with Turning Point headquarters in a long-term future career plan. I would hope to I would separate my politics from policies and things that I would do in UVUSA, but I don't plan on just leaving my organization, no.
Okay. If policy discussions involve topics like DEI initiatives, curriculum content, or faculty governance, areas where Turning Point nationally has taken strong stances, how will you demonstrate your nonpartisan choices?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this falls into separating myself from my politics. I'm a member of an organization, but I'm not the organization itself. So I think it kind of would go on a case-by-case basis. I think a lot of those things depend specifically on each case, and my opinion sways between different examples, but it would definitely be a place of assessing what the student body feels, what they're thinking, because my intention is to be a voice for the people. So it would be assessing how people are feeling about that, more so than what a national organization has. I think there's specific places, and most things under UVSA fall into a place where I would have to separate politics from personal belief, because I'm not going in to represent my personal beliefs. If I wanted to do that, I would just go in and start talking to people, start talking to faculty. So it would just be a matter of saying, hey, I'm functioning as a representative of the student body, and even telling my own club members, hey, I'm a representative of the people. I'm not a representative of you. So if you don't like what I have to say, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Do you believe your association with Turning Point could be a turnoff for moderate or left-leaning students who may question whether you could represent the entire academic community fairly?
I know it is firsthand. I've seen some of the things that people have had to say about me and my affiliation, and some of the in-kind statements that have made about me during the course of this elections campaign. I think it's unfortunate, but honestly, I know that a lot of us are guilty of judging a book by its cover. I know I would probably be a little, maybe not scared off, but questioning of people if they had certain extremist beliefs. So I can understand where people are coming from. I absolutely do understand why they see it as a turnoff, but I do really hope that they take the time to get to know me and talk to me more.
Yeah. Based on what you just said, this is not a question I have written down, but what you just said, it's an interesting choice of words that you just did. You said extremist views. Do you think Turning Point has some extremist views?
I think Turning Point itself does have some views that are seen as extremist. Myself personally, I don't think that I'm as extreme as people think I am. I used to reside on the entire opposite side of the political spectrum, so I think I'm kind of better at understanding both sides. Yeah, I think I'm better at understanding both sides of things, but I know people do say that I have extreme views. I think some of that is a little bit misguided, because some people like to think things of me when they don't really know what I think or don't take the time to get to know me, but I think sometimes there's just a stigma related to an organization in general.
Yeah. So do you think that how do you plan? Obviously, I'm a big fan of people voicing their opinions. I think that's great. I think there's a time and place for some certain things. I also believe, I'm straight up a constitutionalist. If it's in the Constitution, awesome, let's do it. So protesting, doing what you can to make your voice heard legally, I think is awesome.
Agreed.
I don't think it's awesome to vandalize people's posters, even if you're doing it in a small scale, and I'm going to consider university small scale. If you are willing to do that in a small scale here in a university with someone that you don't agree with, I've been talking to some colleagues and they're like, yeah, I saw that Irby's poster had this written on it, or that your posters were taken down and thrown in the trash, or Kennedy's posters and this and that and the third. I don't agree with that, right? I think that's dumb. I think that's very childish and immature. It shows that you don't have an understanding of how politics in general, how politics should work, how a republic should work. That being said, though, how do you plan to try to win that trust? Because that is the most important thing, right? How do you plan to win that trust with the public, considering that you are affiliated with Turning Point? That's rough.
Yeah. So that's sad to hear. For one, I didn't know that vandalism was occurring, and I'm disappointed, but it happens. For one, I engage a lot on social media. I engage with the UVU community story. So that's how I kind of try to get myself out there. But a lot of the people I engage with on social media are from my previous institutions. I'm still kind of getting my feet down here in UVU and making more of those connections. So a lot of what I try to do is just get out and talk to people, make conversations with people that I see in the hallway, and get to know them on a more personal level, because UVU has a huge population, and that's even including the students that are at our remote campuses that are online. There's so many students here to connect with. And I know I'm not going to be able to connect with each and every single one of them, but I think kind of getting those posters up helps with face recognition. So then more people get to see me, and then I can connect with them and they know who I am and they can put a face to the name. That's helped me a lot, but also connecting with people who I know have differing viewpoints than me, just to allow them to see that sometimes online people can look scary, but in person, I love everyone. I just want to connect. I want to talk to people. I love, love, love people, and I love getting to know people, what they love, what helps them, what they want to see from people. So just putting my feet down and getting out into the hallways and meeting people has been honestly really good in helping me bridge the gap. I mean, I've had some people that I know have honestly entirely opposite views from me that have said, hey, I'll consider voting for you in the upcoming elections, just because I sat and had conversations with them for a few minutes.
Okay. If this was just, because it's you, it's Ava, if I'm not mistaken, who else? Alfredo. Timo.
I'm not sure.
Temo.
Sorry, I don't know the pronunciation.
Neither do I. If this was just you versus one other person, who would you prefer it to be? You and versus who?
That's a great question. They're all really good candidates. I mean, from a solely almost take it as an ironic viewpoint, because I think they all rank up pretty well. I would honestly love to see a kind of one-on-one with me and Timo, because as I've been told, he's a member of the CDC. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but my colleagues have told me that he's a member of the CDC. So I think that would kind of be an interesting lineup to see who could represent the people better, and somebody from opposing organizations. Yeah.
Do you think you have a better chance than him to win the election?
Quite honestly, I don't know. What I've seen from the candidates so far has been really, really good. Obviously, I'm rooting for myself. I think it would be a bit concerning if I wasn't. Yeah, but I have seen great things from all of the candidates. I mean, with Alfredo, I loved his campaign posters. I thought they were fantastic. Ava, her photo shoot that she did with the picture, I thought it was so cute. And then Timo, I loved the QR codes, the design of his layout. I think they all have really good things that they've contributed to this election. And I honestly don't have anything bad to say about any of them. I haven't even thought about, I've been trying to just run my own campaign, not trying to think about who can I best or who can I be better than. So I haven't really given that much thought, and maybe I should, but my focus right now has kind of just been running my own campaign and not interfering with theirs.
Are you running your campaign on your own, or do you have a campaign manager?
I don't have a campain manager. No, I had one at the beginning, but not anymore. So it's just kind of been me. I do have help of some friends and colleagues that have been really, really helpful, but most of the weight of that has fallen on my shoulders.
Okay. And you said that you were working a couple of jobs. What are you doing?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do is freelance work. I work in digital media production, so I do a lot of that. I also do freelance modeling. I did a lot of that back home, but I work in a golf course at the pro shop right now, and I actually just got hired over at a gym. So working with those things, and in the free time I have between that, I also tutor kids.
Okay, great. What kind of kids?
Pretty much all ages, K through about 12, and all different kinds of subjects. Kind of depends. Areas like math, I get a little sticky because I haven't touched it since high school, but pretty much anything they need just kind of depends on what the need is. A lot of what I focus on is writing tutoring, just because I am minoring in professional writing studies, so it's something of interest to me.
That is very awesome. one of the questions that have popped up, and the rumors, churn a lot, and obviously with rumors they come to us because everybody wants to be the deep throat from Watergate, right? They want to break a big story, and they think that we're the ones that should break it. It was rumored that you were funded by Turning Point, or that they donated largely to your campaign. Is that true or not?
Yeah, I actually heard that rumor from a lot of different people. No, Turning Point has not donated to my campaign. I'm aware that there's some sort of, fund that they've worked with in the past, but I hadn't reached out to them. For me, I wanted to keep my campaign about as cheap as possible while still being effective. I think that a lot of what can be done is through me speaking, and I think that I shouldn't pay for anyone's vote. So the only funding I have as of right now is from myself, my own pocket, and my good friend, Chip Anderson. He helped fund a lot of my campaign through his fund for, I believe it's a Chip Anderson Yelsma Fund for Civic Excellence. So his nonprofit helped fund some of my campaign, but that was item donations, not money. I haven't received any money from Turning Point.
Why do you think that people assumed that you were being funded by them? I know part of the reason is because previous or current student government members have been, because they were members as well, or previous ones have been. Why is it what made you take the initiative to not wanting to be funded by Turning Point in this race?
Yeah, so part of it was with every election, every campaign I've done for anything as small as middle school and high school roles, I try to keep it as minimally funded as possible because I want people to vote for me, not for what I hand them out or what money I give them. Part of it, I'll be honest, I didn't entirely know about whatever the program is that the school or Turning Point has to fund people. I didn't know about it until a little bit later into my decision to run. So part of it was just a lack of awareness. But also, I just didn't think it was something I needed. I didn't think it was something that would help my campaign. If I really needed the money, if UVU hadn't been able to help provide things like printing and stuff, I guess maybe I would have looked into it. But most people already know that I'm affiliated with Turning Point because I am an officer for our club here, and I don't need to add any more rumors to the process.
Yeah, for sure. Let me take a page from our federal government. Are you willing to release any documentation to us that shows that your donations have been from Chip Anderson only?
Yeah, any donations, like documents, papers, absolutely. There's literally one because everything that every fund I utilize, I have to turn into the elections committee. So you can check with them. I give y'all full permission. There's been one document turned in, and that's from my good friend Chip.
Perfect. Thank you. Federal government does work. See. All right, let's move on from this. I think we sat here long enough, and that was the hot seat. How is it? Is it still burning there?
Warm, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So transfers. We're going to talk about transferring since you are a transfer student. So am I. And credit evaluation. I'm assuming that you have strong feelings about this because you said that you got your associates elsewhere, right?
At Northwest Vista. That's where I worked on it.
And then you came here with an associate's degree. Which
I started on my associates, but then I ended up switching course to work on a bachelor's.
Okay. So how many credits did you have when you transferred to UVU?
When I transferred to UVU, I want to say over 100. If not right around there. I had a good amount under my belt.
Which means it was pretty damn near to you just needed 60 credits to graduate.
Yeah.
Obviously, with transferring, doesn't work that way, right? So clearly you have strong motives with that. You want smoother transfer and credit evaluation process. Given that the standards of accreditation and department discretion often limit that flexibility, what realistic authority would you have to influence these decisions?
Yeah, so my issues with the credit evaluation are kind of with a couple of different universities. Part of the reason I came to UVU is because BYU wouldn't accept me because I had too many credits. And I'd asked them, I was like, hey, is my application concerning anyway? I talked to a bunch of counselors. They said, no, it's just your credits. So this is something I've noticed at a couple of universities. In terms of authority, it's not like I can go in and say, hey, I demand you accept this credit. But I think having a student representative does a lot more than having students complain. I know friends who are transfers who've complained about things like that, but hearing it from a couple of different students isn't always as effective as having a student leader in place to say, hey, as a representative of our transfer students, this is what we're largely hearing. So I think being able to advocate for student needs in a platform that'll give me a better voice will help a lot. For my case in particular, I don't have as much of a right to complain because I have switched majors and minors a couple of different times. I've explored a lot of different fields of study. So a lot of the reason some of my credits didn't transfer was just because they weren't applicable to my degree program, which I totally understand that. I'm not going to complain about that. But I do have friends who are transfers who had credits that they were just frustrated, saying, why isn't this accepted? Why am I having to do this again? For me, I think I've taken general science and history about 3 or 4 times now.
Yeah.
So I do have frustrations like that on myself. But I think having somebody to represent multiple voices rather than just hearing a scattered opinion will do a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how the claim for all universities is, so I'm older, I'm a non-traditional student,
Mm-hmm.
so I went to college when I was 18, took math, took science, took English, whatever,
All the
writing.
gen ed.
Yeah, all the gen ed classes. When I come here, they're like, well, your math is over 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, did math change?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is 1 + 1 not 2 anymore? Did we discover something new that math becomes voided and null after 5 years? So I thought that was ridiculous. I think
Absolutely.
it's so dumb.
And
The way universities in general just do accreditation, but
And I think things like that definitely need some fixing. I mean, just because you've been out of the program for a few years, for some people, they may need to retake it. I definitely know if I wanted to go study math, I would definitely I'd need to retake some of the basics.
Yeah.
I know myself. But for other people, you might be perfectly fine. I think we really should have more testing out of credits, which I know is available sometimes, but it's also really hard to navigate. I mean, most of the transfer students I talked to said, yeah, I don't think that's an option at all, which I know some universities is, some it isn't. I think that should be a more standard thing, because if
Yeah.
I've done the work I've put in, because it's not even about putting in the work, you put in hours, you put in money into getting these credits. So to have it just say, yeah, we're not going to count that, it's really frustrating, especially when some classes look like they line up almost exactly, and it's just by some small standard that they aren't allowed to credit them.
different textbook, different whatever.
Exactly. I would love to see more transfer students able to test out of those credits, because some of my credits that didn't transfer over, if you asked me to take a final on them right now, I can guarantee I'd pass it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's very interesting just the way that things get evaluated. I know I changed my career path here just because I was coming in with about 100 credits or so, a little less than 100. And my original career path was within digital media as well.
Okay.
And it was going to put me to graduate 2 years. At that point, it would have been 3 years, 3.5 years from that time period. I was like, I don't have that luxury of time because of my goals. Like, I was trying to do particular things with the federal government. And so I don't have that time. Like, I was in a time crunch. And so I was trying to test out of a lot of things. One professor was willing to allow me to test out. He was like, hey, I'll give you the midterm. That would be your testing out. If you could pass that without me teaching you anything, you're squared away.
Mm-hmm.
There was another professor that had sent him something, and he was just like, no, you have to take this class.
That's so disappointing.
Only because it's not written at a standard that you want doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Exactly.
Like, I'm writing in the standard of what Hollywood has, not your standard. Like, there's a difference. Anyway, it was very frustrating.
I think a large part of the frustration for me and the students I've talked to goes back to the money. We pay to be here. I'm paying to take these classes. So to just have it say, yeah, all that money you pay for that class doesn't count is frustrating. Even though I understand where the university comes from and that there are certain rules they have to follow, I wish we could create more flexibility there.
Yeah, for sure. What specific bottlenecks at UVU have you been able to identify? Without naming departments, what departments do you notice are the ones that mostly have this pattern? Or are you just with the bottleneck, and are you just being very general about the situation?
Yeah, I am being a bit broad. A lot of that has become, I can speak more to my personal experience than I can to anyone else's. And I had a really difficult time when I transferred here with advising and such. This is something I've noticed from a lot of other departments more so, but as well. But I see it a lot in more of our arts degrees, not so much in the STEM ones. I think because fields like STEM, usually there's a more direct outline of what needs to be done, especially with students that are pre-med and things like that. I started out as a STEM major at my second university. I was a STEM major, and I felt like I had a lot easier time figuring out my course plan and what I needed to do as a STEM major than when I went into music and education and all that, which is a different university, but I kind of got to see that there a little bit. So it's kind of a broad generalization based on personal experience, but I think there's some inconsistencies with advising in general. I had a really hard time when I first started just because I couldn't get an appointment with the right advisor for the longest time. And I made my decision to apply to UVU pretty short notice. So I was kind of in a pace of, I need to get set up real quick. And I tried to schedule with an advisor that I thought was in my realm, and then waited a week for that meeting. And then she said, oh, well, you actually don't meet with me. You meet with this person. So then I went to that person and was, well, actually, you meet with this person. So I felt like I was just running back and forth in areas that I started getting stressed for time and could have been condensed. So personal experience like that obviously means more to me because I can speak to that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the friends that I've spoken to come more so from the arts related departments than our STEM fields. And I think that's where I see some of those issues with advising and clarity more.
Awesome. You have a public relations background and you want to emphasize in communication clarity. To you, what does that mean?
Like, what does clear communication mean?
Yeah.
I think a lot of that boils down to transparency. There's a lot of different elements that go into communication, how we communicate, being effective, being concise, all the things that I learned about in my classes. But I think a large important part of communication, specifically within UVUSA, comes down to transparency, because there's a lot that gets communicated behind the scenes, but if you don't communicate it with the student body, sometimes they can view that as an area of frustration. This was something I picked up on from last year, and just from talking to students and hearing my peers, is that they were frustrated with not getting communication from the student association on what was going on, which, being involved in elections and such, I see a lot more of how much they do behind the scenes. And I more so can understand where they're coming from on how it's hard to speak on everything they're doing. But I think the more you communicate with people, the easier it's going to make things. And this was a problem I ran into in leadership at my last university, because our university was having rumors about possibly being shut down, possibly going bankrupt, all the things that you don't want to hear when you're an organization leader. And I kept pushing my admin saying, hey, you need to speak to the students, because rumors kept going around, and the more rumors spread, the more panic spread that didn't need to, just because it took them so long to address the public. So by the time they finally addressed the student body and said, hey, this is what's going on, nobody believed them, because they were saying, why did it take you so long to put a statement out? Right. Which is a lengthy explanation. Just to go back to, I think transparency and just putting your voice out there to the students will be really effective for communication.
Okay. And then a lot of the times there's a lot of very complex things that go around in a university, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of like school might be going bankrupt and such and such. But how will you avoid oversimplifying things where it could just mislead students?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what I adapt in my personal life when making statements about things is I tend to pair kind of broad overviews with the specifics. So just because sometimes if you get too lengthy and too descriptive, students tune out. They don't want to read that. They give you a TLDR. But then if you oversimplify it, there's a lot of room for misinterpretation. Right. So a lot of times when I give public statements about things that are going on, like what happened with my university, it's good to give kind of an overview as well as a further detail, and making sure that that overview is paired with that and not saying, hey, this is it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's move on and let's talk about student government in general. Student government does not have a lot of authority, right? You could make suggestions, but sometimes your suggestions could be taken and they could be copied into the trash can, right?
Yeah.
So what structural leverage would you use to turn your advocacy into an actual institutional change?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that is just going through the right channels, talking to the right people, and, for lack of a better word, harping on them. I think sometimes I see people that they'll go and advocate for things and they'll have this great plan and they'll say, hey, we need this, but then somebody kind of says, whatever, shrugs them off, and they back down. I'm not one to back down. If there's something that my student body needs, I will advocate for it. I don't plan to just say, hey, can we do this? No, okay, well, that's great. I plan to say, hey, well, this is why it would benefit. Can I change your mind? What can I do? Convincing people. And I think also going through the proper channels makes a huge difference. Just going on the UVU story and saying, hey, this is a problem, this sucks, somebody do something about it, isn't going to make a change. Right. But finding out who's in charge, who I need to talk to. I mean, I've done this even within student leadership and stuff, saying, hey, who's your boss? Who do I need to talk to? Okay, great. Now her. Okay, who can I talk to about this? Just getting through the right channels to make sure that my voice is heard, and honestly, just not backing down from things that matter to our students.
That's a really good point, right, where you don't back down. But in that vein, how would you, if a faculty member's pushing back on whatever it is, how would you go about responding without overstepping your boundaries within student government?
I think a lot of it is in the approach and the way you present yourself. So when I say don't back down, I'm not one to go yell and scream and say, hey, you need to do this. I'm very concise with my wording and saying, hey, this is what we need. This is why we need it. And I think just being respectful in the way you approach people can make a lot of difference. Saying, hey, I hear you. I understand why you're saying this isn't a good fit, but here's what the student body is saying. Here's where I'm seeing a need. And just really, really paying attention to your approach. If you come on hostile to someone, most of the time they're going to tune out and they're going to want to turn you down anyway. So I feel like coming with a respectful approach. And sometimes I know there are going to be things that our student association may advocate for that we're just shut down and told no. And that's an unfortunate part of being a representative. It does happen. But I think making sure you're careful in your approach with the students when those things happens also makes a difference. Saying, hey, I did push for this, it's just not feasible at this time for these reasons, would make a lot of difference to the students, so they at least know that you're being a voice for them.
Yeah. So one of the things that you have said is classes should challenge students, navigating the system shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But some may argue that learning to navigate complex systems is part of a professional preparation. Why should college be different?
Yeah, so I guess there's a lack of clarity in my wording there. I don't think that everything in this life should be insanely easy. I think more so the focus of that statement is just to say that your curriculum obviously is going to be hard. What you test in, what you learn, it's going to challenge you. But figuring out how to plan your classes, figuring out how you're going to pay for school, how you're going to make your schedule work shouldn't be the hard part of college. Obviously, navigating systems is a good skill to have, and I think a lot of that we learn even within classes. There's systems I've had to navigate within my classes specifically, but if you can't even figure out how to get started and how to get things set up, then you're not going to learn any of that in your classes. And a lot of that goes back to my experience as a transfer and even talking to people who are first-time freshmen and the difficulties that they had getting set up at UVU. When I transferred in, I had a decently difficult time getting set up. So when I originally came into elections, I wanted to be a voice for transfer students a lot. But then I thought about it and I said, if I'm having a hard time as a transfer student who's done this already once or twice before, then our freshmen who have never applied for a college or who have never set something up before are probably going to have as much of, if not a worse time figuring things out. So it's more so just I want people to be able to come to UVU and not feel held back by confusion about the process. Obviously, your classes are going to be hard, but figuring out how to get to them shouldn't be, in my opinion.
Yeah, but wouldn't that just be coddling people to like a safe space? And when you do that, they don't learn, right? So how do you find that happy medium between not coddling someone? You might be 18, you're an adult officially. Mm-hmm. You got to start doing adult things. How do you not coddle that person so like that they don't think they go into a job and they think that someone's going to hold their hand the entire time?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that is, I think there's a lack of coddling just based on the fact that students have to navigate that system themselves. Some people, their parents help them through it, but for the most part, it's you are navigating that yourself. You don't have a UVU assistant to come and say, hey, click this button, now click this one, now go here. So even if we simplified things to make them more easy to navigate, such as knowing who your advisors are, knowing who you can reach out to, having an easier time with class scheduling, the students are still having to go in and take those steps to apply, to look for scholarships, to find a schedule that works for them, all those types of things. So I think there's still a large amount of accountability on the student themselves to be responsible and navigate. I don't think that's going to entirely go away just by making the system easier. So I think there's still a good challenge to, not a challenge, but a good responsibility on the student to navigate that system.
Okay. What do you think is a UVU academic policy that's like extremely flawed that you would like to see changed?
As for policies at UVU specifically, there haven't been any specific academic policies that have been a huge red flag to me. I think it's more just kind of the inner workings that you see. I know for a large part, and I've harped on this a lot, but it is navigating the system. It is being able to navigate your degree path. Policy, I couldn't say specifically, but as for issues with UVU itself, I know sometimes I have issues with class scheduling, as do other students, because there's a lot of classes that will show up as available, but then you can't add them to your schedule. Things that they'll show times and dates are available, but then when you go in to actually add them, you can't. And that's really, really difficult when you're navigating adding classes, setting up a schedule for next semester. So I think that's something not policy related, but directly related to UVU that could be easily tweaked.
For sure. Okay, so here's the last thing. You're going to look at that camera right over there. Mm-hmm. Tell them why should they vote for you? Yeah.
I think everyone should vote for me because I want to be a voice for the students. If you want your voice to be heard, I want to represent it, and I think that is largely important, especially in a student association that favors representative government.
Awesome. Thank you.
Perfect.
This is our interview from We Are Wolverines here with Sage Lloyd and running for Vice President of Academics. Once again, just a reminder, the UVU Review does not endorse any candidate, but we do give the voice to every candidate to let you know why you should vote for them. And we'll see you next time on We Are Wolverines.